San Miguel del Allende, Mexico. Nellie and Sammy Morad stood on the edge of the tiny square as a large mariachi band played a lively Mexican folk tune. The sound of guitars, violins, and trumpets soared through the mountain air. In the center of the square, dancers swirled in bright yellow skirts. Spectators swayed and sang, applauding the dancers in bursts of joy. Normally, Nellie would be all over this kind of festivity. She'd be searching out the perfect empanda, chatting with a local, buying an ice cream from a vendor, sipping a tamarind soda, gazing into the soulful eyes of her gorgeous boyfriend. But now she just shifted impatiently as she searched the crowd. They had stopped at Fisk's house, but the housekeeper had only told them that he was at the festival at the Jardin, which was what everyone called the central square of the town. It seemed impossible to locate him in this crush. "Let's keep moving," Nellie said to Sammy. When she turned, Sammy was putting away his phone, an anxious look on his face. "What's wrong?" "I haven't been able to reach my parents," he said. "It's weird that I haven't heard from them, especially since I told them I was flying to Mexico with you." "Don't they work all the time? Maybe they're involved in some big experiment." The Morads were basically geniuses. Sammy's mother was a physicist, and his father was some kind of biochemical trailblazer. Nellie wasn't quite sure. One night, in his lab, Sammy had described their studies, and Nellie had fallen asleep in his armchair. She had been too embarrassed to ask him to repeat it. "Yeah, but they usually check in. Like, right now, they should be saying, 'Sammy, you need to study, not run off to Mexico with your girlfriend.'" He smiled, but the worried look didn't leave his face. Sammy was a graduate student in biochemistry who, until he met her, stayed in his lab to work all hours of the night, studying through holidays and school breaks. Nellie was relieved that his parents seemed to like her, even though she was a Mexican-American part-time college student with platinum streaks in her dark hair, whose aspiration was to run her own pan-global tapas restaurant, and who had pulled their son into Cahill family intrigue, and, worst of all, was a Red Sox fan. Suddenly, the crowd began to chant, "El Coyote! El Coyote!" "Who is that?" Nellie wondered. The woman standing next to her overheard. "You haven't heard of El Coyote? The great Mexican dancer?" Just then, a blare of trumpets announced the new dancer. A slender figure appeared in the middle of the dancers, as though he'd materialized out of thin air. He was dressed in white pants and a flowing white shirt, and wore a beautifully carved coyote mask over his face. "El Coyote!" the crowd roared. Guitars hummed in a menacing tune as he stalked the women, dancing gracefully around them as they pretended to run, leaping and twirling. The trumpets burst forth as the dancer joined the women, pretending to flick his non-existent skirts at them and copying their movements so expertly that the spectators gave hoots of laughter and applauded again. The dance became a blur of white and yellow as he twirled with the dancers faster and faster until they were like flowers in a whirlwind. The crowd around the Jardine roared their approval, and more cries of El Coyote thundered through the square. Nellie shook her head. "He's amazing," she murmured. "Un guerrero formidable," the woman next to her agreed. The music ended. The dancers bowed. Laughing, Fisk Cahill removed his coyote mask. His gaze met Nellie's across the square, and his grin slowly faded. Fisk's rented house was up a twisting cobblestone street from the colonial town. Below them, they could glimpse the pink spire of the church. Sunlight splashed on the charming buildings painted in shades of mango, ochre, and avocado. They sought shelter from the afternoon sun in the courtyard underneath a spreading laurel tree. Blasts of blooming purple bougainvillea tumbled down the walls of the hacienda. The air was sweet and scented with blossoms. Trouble seemed very far away, but trouble darkened Fisk's expression as he watched the video on Nellie's tablet. He tapped on his glass of limeade, his fingers beating a rhythm of anxiety. "I didn't expect a power grab like this," he said, his gaze far away as he looked over the town. "I thought we'd seen enough calamity for one lifetime. What do we know about this outcast?" "We know he's a Cahill, but we can't find out any information on his background," Nellie said. "He's been recruiting for a while, we think." "I know Magnus," Fisk said. "He was always power-hungry, and Patricia is just like her great-uncle." "What about him?" Nellie asked, zooming in to the man they couldn't identify. "We don't have a clear shot of his face." Fisk tilted the tablet toward himself. He zoomed into the man's hand. "Bad news. See that missing finger joint on his pinky? That's Irina Spassky's brother, Alexander." Irina was a cupcake compared to him. "I didn't know she even had a brother," Nellie said. "He was never an active Lucian. All photos of him mysteriously vanished shortly after his disappearance." Fisk clasped his hands together and bent forward, his face creased in anxiety. He was an assassin for the KGB. Nellie felt a chill move through her despite the sun on her shoulders. "What about the outcast?" Amy thought that since we can't access the digital archives, you might have some idea as who he could be. "We know when you were younger, you left the operation of the family to Grace, but we figure this guy is in his 80s, and you might have met him long ago." "He doesn't look familiar," Fisk said. "He looks as though he's had surgery, though." "Definitely," Nellie agreed. "What about when he quotes Grace? If your best instincts are your worst enemies, take your hands off the controls. Find someone else to fly the plane." Amy thinks it might be significant. Does that sound familiar? Fisk shook his head. No, Nellie knew Fisk well enough to know that something was troubling him, something more than receiving the news of the takeover. All she had to do was wait.